We're doing it live this week on a very special Thanksgiving. It's not Thanksgiving. On a very special Halloween episode of the Eldritch Lorecast.
It's very fitting that we delayed our discussion of the Deck of Many Things because the Deck of Many Things has now been delayed.
I'm kind of curious about this idea of we've added more cards to the deck.
But Black Flag have...
Did you say Butt Flag?
Wizards of the Coast.
They're refocusing on interactive entertainment?
From what they were saying.
That's surprising to me, actually.
MCDM are launching their crowdfunding for the MCDM RPG in December.
It's typically unwise to launch a crowdfunding campaign in December.
Critical Role sold out Wembley Arena. The Lorecast listeners are from all over the world. How many of them could we get in one room?
I bet we could definitely get 12.
James, oh no, I almost did it again.
Are you okay?
No, it's so spooky in here. I think my brain's overheating from having this satin bag on my head. Dael, you do it.
Are you scared? You should be. All that and more right now.
Good evening, everybody, and welcome to this week's episode of the Eldritch Lorecast, the greatest, the most famous, the most renowned throughout all the realms of tabletop RPG podcasts. I shall be your host for this evening, the greatest and most humble of the witches' companions, the Bard Dandelion. My name is Ben Byrne, and I am joined as always by James Haig, Dael Kingsmill, Shawn Merwin, and Shawn, what have you dressed at for this spooky edition of the Eldritch Lorecast?
The most terrifying thing I could think of was relatives. So I am Cousin Eddie from National Lampoon Christmas Vacation. The only alcoholic beverage I had was a cider. That didn't quite fit, so I don't have that or the cigar, but otherwise I'm full in character.
Fair. Dael Kingsmill for this creepy episode of the Lorecast.
Yeah, I didn't so much go creepy. I've gone with Marty McFly from Back to the Future. I couldn't find my aviators, but I remembered that I had a future hat. So a little bit of mix and matching between the first and second film, but we'll make it work.
How is the future now that you've come back?
Never ask.
All right, fair enough. That's a safe bet. James Haig, your costume for this evening?
A podcast host is never late, nor is he early, Ben Byrne. He arrives precisely when he means to. My costume for Halloween this year is sexy Gandalf the White, but I thought that would scandalize the Lorecast a little bit, so I decided to be Gandalf has a nice, cozy afternoon in with the dwarves for this particular showing.
We've got We've got a loot of news to get through today, so let us crack on into that news, starting with, now, it's very fitting that we delayed our discussion of the Deck of Many Things, because the Deck of Many Things has now been delayed. Speaking of spooky things, the spookiest of all, manufacturing delays. Ooh. Yes, the Deck of Many Things physical release has been delayed with no new date announced yet, as far as I know, at time of recording. The digital release is unaffected. It will still release on November 14th. And if anybody pre-ordered the physical plus digital bundle through D&D Beyond, they'll still get access to the digital on October 31st. So today tomorrow if you're in the States. So that should still work out. Have any of us, to kind of merge two discussions together, have any of us been able to get their hands on the deck? Is anybody excited for this product when it finally arrives?
No, and not really.
I haven't gotten my hands on it, but I'm kind of curious about this idea of we've added more cards to the deck. I'm curious. I don't know whether I would say I'm excited.
Sure.
I'm curious to see what has been added, what direction they've gone in, because I just feel like there's something delightfully old school mean-spirited about the Deck of Many Things. And I can't help but theorize that the new editions might not be quite so mean-spirited. And I don't know how I feel about that yet.
Yeah, I think from a couple of reviews that I've looked at, they've said that the extra, so I think it's 22 cards is the original deck, and they've added another 44 cards for a total of 66, Ooh. I believe, off the top of my head. But the idea is that it's kind of you build your own deck of many things, which I really like that customizability of it. Mm-hmm. And from what I've heard through the framing of complaint, in all honesty, but I actually think it's a good thing, is that the new set of cards tend towards the less game-breaking, the less mean-spirited towards the players, and kinda. I don't know what those things are specifically, but I, in all honesty, love the sound of this product. I didn't think I would at all. I did not think that, like, the Deck of Many Things sounded like the most hokey, high fantasy, ridiculous thing. But when they put out a video, I think last week, they talked about different ways to use the deck. And one suggestion that I really, really liked was this idea that you don't draw a card and then whatever the card says instantly happens, but you draw a card and it's like fortune telling for the future of the campaign. So if you draw a card that gives you riches, it's not like a pile of money suddenly drops on top of you or your bank account suddenly goes to full. It's a suggestion to the GM and in some capacity the players that they will find riches soon, you know, in their future, in a much more organic, natural way. If they draw the death card where the Grim Reaper's trying to kill them, doesn't mean a Reaper is suddenly going to apparate out of nowhere and start trying to kill them. It might mean that someone in the campaign is actively hunting for them and wants to murder them. And so it allows you to kind of use the Deck of Many Things as an improv suggestion mechanism that's played out in front of the players so they feel more involved in it. But it's still up to the GM to be able to build atmosphere around the deck so that it doesn't have to feel like a magic genie kind of rubbing the lamp and suddenly something magical happens, which I was very suddenly like, okay, that sounds cool. I'm into that idea.
There's a lot about that I do really like. But again, the old school deck is just so iconic in the way that it'll wreck your sorry, Dante. But, you know, it's just, there's something about the way that the deck can just instantly destroy everything that I think plays into this risk reward thing with the players. They're like, we've got this magic item. It's a legendary magic item. And I could draw a card from it right now and it could change everything for the better. Or I could instantly die. Or I could end the world, or, you know, any number of things. And that, you know, back and forth, do I draw a card? Do I not draw a card? I just wonder whether there'll be less of that. But at the same time, I do like the sound of everything that you just described.
Yeah, I don't think that the way that the new, and again, this is all going on preview information. By the sounds of it, none of us have insider knowledge or have seen the actual product ourselves yet. So this is just going off what they've said in preview, but the intention is that it's customizable. That kind of zany draw instant effect is still possible with the deck and probably still the predominant way that it would be used, or they expect it to be used. But they've accounted for alternative uses for it to suit different types of campaigns. That makes me excited for it in a way that I didn't expect to be.
Plus you get a pretty prep deck.
Very few things destroyed campaigns back in first edition days like the Deck of Many Things. As a player who loves chaos, I loved it. As a DM who likes campaigns to continue, I hated it. And in fourth edition, they created a great product called The Secrets of Gardmore Abbey, or something about Gardmore Abbey. And they did an incredible job of tying the deck to a story. And so that gives me hope that this new product will do the same thing. And the way you're talking, it sounds like they have.
Yeah, I've seen other uses where you can plot a whole campaign by sort of drawing cards from the deck, and it's not necessarily, again, draw instant effect, but the idea is
That's
kind
cool.
of, Talaman has said in the chat, kind of like how the Tarokka deck works in Curse of Strahd. I'm not super familiar with how the Tarokka deck works, but that's not the first time I've heard that comparison, so I assume there's possibly some design crossover that they've borrowed there. That suggests, you know, you draw a card and that gives you a location. And then you draw another card and that gives you like a purpose for going to that location. I'm misquoting because I'm going off the top of my head, but it's sort of something like that. And you end up drawing about 8 cards. Some of them you place across others to kind of enhance or affect another card. And that helps you plot out the course of your campaign.
Like a terror spread. That's cool.
Yeah, exactly. I really like the sound of this product, particularly the physical deck, which has problems that we'll get to in a moment, which is why it's been delayed. And this book that kind of gives you options and ideas about how to use this deck in different ways when a different card is drawn.
Sort of
so that
plot
the
hooks attached to the deck, right? Is
Yeah.
a sort of thing for the book. And I am kind of excited about that.
Yeah. So there's 2 books. There's a 120-page book about kind of with short campaigns, one-shots for acquiring the deck, some lore, I think. There's some magic items in there. I think a background or 2 in there. So there's all that kind of, typical expansion for 5e style stuff in that 120-page book. And then the 80-page book, which is here's the possible effects for each of these 66 cards that we've come up with. You can choose how to integrate these effects into your game based on that card being drawn. And then there's the physical card itself, physical deck of cards, I should say, itself, which, assuming that they're well made, look very pretty from what I've seen with their gold foiling and artwork and such. The big question that's being asked around the community, and I'm kind of curious for your takes, is does that sound worth $100 US, which is the retail, what they're retailing it for? I kind of think yes, but I'm in the sphere of $100 Australian. I think that's worth it, but a lot of folks, it's hard to tell what the conversion really is between Australian and US within the context of their economy. So I've seen it here retailed for like $130, but most retailers are discounting it down to about $110, $100 here in Australia. So that's pretty reasonable, but I don't know how.
Let's look at it this way. In an argument that is often stated but rarely seems to change anyone's mind, how many hours of entertainment are you going to get out of this product? And will that actually make a difference to anyone who wants to buy it?
Sure.
In a standard RPG book, which you pay $50 for, probably $60 now after the price increases.
Yeah.
You're going to get well over 100 hours of enjoyment for 4, 5, 6 different people. So 600 human hours of fun. You compare that to the cost of a movie or even the cost of a single player video game. I mean, like, if you look at it from that sort of utilitarian perspective, it is an unbelievable value. But I don't think humans are that purely logical and utilitarian in their thinking. They see a price increase of any kind, even if it's for a whole new peripheral that will add a whole bunch of like immersion value to the product, right? People love props, but people don't much love paying for props.
But also on the other end of humans aren't that utilitarian and practical. Pretty thing makes pretty good nice.
The problems, and there's actually a pretty good video on a YouTube channel called Game Masters, one word, which gives a fairly good kind of look at what the physical manufacturing problems are, which are that the cards are warped, which is a common issue apparently when you try to foil cards. I imagine that's probably especially true if you're foiling along the edges, because the foiling just kind of, has, pulls on the cardboard or something, I assume, which warps the card. And the second problem is that the cards are of different size by millimeters, but like in a printing capacity, they're kind of 3 different sizes, which makes a huge difference to how they feel to shuffle. And you might even be able to tell which one of a group of cards you're about to draw based on the size comparison to the rest of the cards in the deck. So that's definitely not ideal, and that definitely tarnishes the value proposition of purchasing this, which Wizards are now deciding to address, which is, despite the unfortunate delay, a good thing over shipping a product which doesn't meet standard. But assuming that the cards aren't warped and they're all the same size, this is a beautiful looking product. Like I would want to pull this out at my table.
It brings out all the oohs and the ahs.
Yeah, exactly.
I feel like I have not seen that much focus on the wow factor of the peripheral in the marketing of this thing. I've mostly seen it about the contents of the book. And when I think about the D&D, ancillary products that I want to buy, like dice and stuff like that, I get these gorgeous glamour shots of them shoved in my face on social media and ads. And I just haven't seen that done for these cards. Have you?
Not a lot, to be honest. The only time I've seen them has been people complaining about the quality of them. So, but even within that Game Master's video, as he shows them off, I'm like, oh yeah, I can see the problems, but they're still super pretty. Like, I still, want an idealized version of those.
I wonder if the average person will think the same. The average DM, because it's going to be DMs who are buying this book.
Especially, there's relatively, from what I understand, limited player content in there. It's sort of magic items and, player backgrounds, but there's 2 of those, so it's kind of like you take a glance at them, you want them, you don't. Shawn, what do you think?
About what?
This was just an interesting tidbit, but it's doubly interesting to put context around it. So the cliff notes of this story being that Wizards of the Coast, their Q3 or revenue is up by about 40% on Q3 of last year. So July, August, September, for folks who may not know, I'm not sure. The amount of money that they made is higher. However, when you see a headline that says Wizards of the Coast revenue is up, it's like, oh, wow, D&D must be selling really well. The reason that their revenue is up is predominantly what they're attributing it to is a little bit Magic the Gathering. Magic's been going strong, apparently. But also Baldur's Gate is sold really strong and made them a bag of money. And also Monopoly Go, which is a mobile game. Obviously not related to Wizards, but they've kind of bundled Wizards
weird,
of the
right?
Coast and their digital areas together. I agree, Dael. That is weird.
But okay, sure.
If you read from quarter to quarter the reports that you get, they'll move things around. So one time they'll talk about this group, and you're not sure if D&D is in that group or what. So there's some investor shenanigans, shell game stuff going on to say what they want to say and sort of downplay what they want to downplay.
And let the words fall out. Honestly, I want to see. Okay.
No, I have no idea where you went with that.
Say what you want to say. I can't be the only one.
Despite how I'm dressed, I'm not generally down with the
Live your life.
the
Keep
popular
talking.
music. Interestingly, Hasbro's revenue as total is down 10% for Q3, but they still seem pretty positive from what I was reading about their strategy in terms of the fact that they've sold off E1 now. They're looking less at trying to produce how do I phrase this? I want to say entertainment, but entertainment is definitely something they would still use as selling their own company. But they're less in the kind of film and television production side of things and focusing on play, what they do best according to themselves. So
they're refocusing on interactive entertainment?
From what they were saying, from what I could tell, yeah.
That's surprising to me, actually. After everything we've talked about this year, from the OGL crisis to now, to the common sort of buzz phrase of D&D is under monetized, I think we were all highly expecting a switch to broad, to branding as the main focus of D&D's money-making scheme, right? Branding video games and movies and TV shows and stuff like that. But if that's what they're saying now, that they're focusing away less on passive entertainment and more back on their core pillars of gamified entertainment, it leads me to believe that this is inspired largely by the D&D movie not wowing them with their box office results. Because I think we saw it. They made back their money and they made a profit, but it was not the mind-blowing profit that, Marvel movies had probably trained the corporate bankers to expect from a release like that.
This was Hasbro talking, not necessarily Wizards of the Coast talking. So I think it's maybe Hasbro's intention to focus their efforts specifically on interactive play, but they would still look at licensing where it would make sense to external companies, as opposed to their previous strategy being to own E1 and be able to produce movies semi-in-house. That's what I am inferring from the information.
So we're not going to get another Battleship starring Liam Neeson, is what you're telling me.
Yeah, I know it's not what we're here for, but also I'm a little bit like focused on like, what does this mean for Power Rangers?
Yeah, I mean, the D&D movie definitely didn't do what people hoped it would do, which is sad. But I watched that movie on the plane back from Gen Con. It's a good movie. I still like it.
Battleship?
No.
D&D? Which one?
The D&D movie.
Oh, okay, great.
Yeah.
I was really hoping you'd watch Battleship starring Liam Neeson.
Yeah, on a plane.
Gen Con. That seems like the perfect time to watch Battleship starring Liam Neeson.
We're contractually obligated to say starring Liam Neeson after every time you say Battleship.
Yes, absolutely.
Speaking of learning about new things, because I didn't know Battleship with Liam Neeson was a movie before, something else Wizards of the Coast are doing, which is cool, is partnering with an organization called adoptaclassroom.org, offering hardcover copies of 4 D&D books, including the 3 core books plus Candlekeep Mysteries, a copy of some terrain sets, the campaign cases that they came out with earlier this year, and the Essentials kit, donating it to up to 200 schools, I believe. I'm looking for the number right now. Yes, 200 schools, plus $100 library grant to the schools that get the books. That's cool. Get more D&D in schools.
Let's all just do the double thumbs up at the same time.
Every time this happens, I have like a little sort of worry in the back of my head that we're going to make D&D really uncool by making it like in schools and libraries and stuff like that. But then I like, whatever.
That's the secret, James. We've always been uncool.
Yes, good.
I think D&D here in Australia, there's a lot of schools that I'm aware of that have D&D clubs, which I think is cool, which is usually an initiative by one of the teachers who's passionate about the game, or there might be a small group of kids at a couple of schools that I taught at who are running their own D&D game. Actually, super funny quick story. When I was at a school once, a student tried to lie to me about something. I was like, hey, put that away. And they're like, I don't have anything, sir. And I said, deception check failed. And one of the other kids went, oh, you play D&D? Anyway, that was a funny side story. It is still relatively fringe in terms of like the perception of, I think kids are less likely to start at their own D&D group in school if there isn't one that's established by the staff. This is complete conjecture, I suppose. But having these resources in school and having the school being able to say like, yeah, we're starting this club, or we have these books available, and kind of making it seem like something that's easily accessible and, fun to do, but also destigmatizing it as a niche hobby or a nerdy hobby or something like that, I think is good for getting more people to try out role-playing games, because they might find their thing.
The change in perception of the hobby over the last 20 years, 40 years, 50 years has been incredible. When I first started at the software company I worked for in the mid-1990s, we brought it up that I play this game, do some work for this game. And all of this, like the salespeople and the customer support people were like, like looking around awkwardly, like they wanted to leave the room. And 20 years later, those same people who are now having children are calling me up and asking, how can I get involved? What do I need to buy them? How, right? So that's how things have changed. So we are seeing schools that 20 years ago, I know for sure would never have allowed the game into its building, are now trying to create these clubs that bring kids together to play games and socialize. So yeah, we've seen a huge sea change in that area. And I know Wizards has even more initiatives that they're working on that we'll hear about more as time passes.
Speaking of new initiatives, breaking news, a little bit of breaking news. This isn't on the run sheet, but worth just mentioning, because I was a little surprised. MCDM are launching the crowdfunding. I believe it's a Kickstarter. I actually can't remember off the top of my head. But they are launching their crowdfunding for the MCDM RPG in December of all months. Starting, I think, on the 6th or the 7th of December. So there's something to look forward to in the Christmas period?
It's typically unwise to launch a crowdfunding campaign in December because of your competition with the Christmas holidays.
They will be negotiating those budgets a lot, yeah.
Yeah, nice one, Ben. I see what you did there. But I don't know. The MCDM has always kind of marched to the beat of its own drum, so maybe it's got
this is true.
Maybe it's got a sort of scheme that goes against conventional wisdom. I mean, it's paid off for them in the past.
I just really want to see, and if they don't do it themselves, then we'll do it on the Lorecast on the week that they launch. I really want to see just a thumbnail of Matt Colville dressed as Santa Claus. That's all. That's all I need. Because I think he'd make a great Santa Claus.
I feel like there's no chance in hell that's going to happen. So everyone look forward to that Lorecast thumbnail.
I think that you can go sign up for updates if you want to on that one. But yeah, launching in December. I don't think they've said too much else about it. Speaking of new role-playing games, sort of, Black Flag. This is reheating news a little bit for us. This happened mid-October and it kind of skipped past me. But Black Flag.
Did you say butt flag?
I said back flag. Thank you.
The buck flag?
E pluribus anus.
The Kobold Press Black Flag RPG reference document version 1 has been made public for folks to, I suppose, start using for creating their, even though the rules, I have to imagine at this point, aren't quite finalized. Maybe this is just a look at, an initial kind of glance at to see what the rules are going to look like. Has anybody looked through these?
Yes, I have. I have been working on projects that are going to take into account these. And we've already discussed this. It was Kobold Press worried that they were not going to be able to use the Open Gaming License anymore. And so they created a new version of the game that would always be around. And that's what it is. And it's good. It's good to have choices. It's good to have options. More power to them as we see what they come up with in terms of products. Because I like me some Kobold Press stuff.
This is kind of unrelated to Black Flag, though I will bring it back in. But I randomly ran into Wolfgang Bauer at the Seattle Opera House attending an Eddie Izzard comedy show just like last week. So
as one does.
As one does. It was bizarre. I just turned and there was Wolfgang Bauer. It was awesome. Very humanizing moment for me and Wolfgang. But that anecdote aside, I think the thing I'm most interested in for Black Flag, and the thing I pray most for its future, is that it has a long future, right? We have so many AD&D retro clones out there, right? Dungeon Crawl Classics, Castles and Crusades, more that I don't know the names of because I'm not really plugged into that scene. And I'm really curious to see if in the wake of all of this, there will also be kind of in the course of the next 5 to 10 years, a sort of tide of 5e-ish retro clones as people get nostalgic for 2014, which is a sort of devastating sentence for me to say. And I'm really curious to see how just kind of like Pathfinder has changed and evolved and become something of its own beast in the fantasy gaming sphere. Will Black Flag, will Tales of the Valiant have a similar sort of divergent evolution as it becomes its own thing, distinct from, whatever one D&D becomes?
I have an important question. Is it still called fantasy quest adventure game? What's
Tales
the name?
of the Valiant is the name of the game.
Okay,
Yes.
okay. But the SRD is being called Black Flag?
Correct.
Why are we just calling the game Black Flag? Whatever, it's fine. I'm not upset about it.
Well, I suppose it's because the SRD, the basic rules, are they the D&D rules, because sometimes they're like, people can get into a habit of saying, because I've used the rules for D&D in this game that I've created or this adventure that I've created, which technically and legally speaking is not true. You're not allowed to say it's a D&D game unless you're publishing it through DM's Guild or something. It's a 5e game. So maybe they're trying to make that distinction. Again, this is also like a version 1. This SRD might change. And so they might rename it at that point. But it is intended, I think, for people to be able to use it to create not their own games, their own identities of games without it necessarily being called a Tales of the Valiant game, maybe.
If I were them, I'd swap them because I think the Black Flag is memorable and brand-worthy. Whereas Tales of the Valiant, I literally couldn't remember.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't have a detailed look at this document. I only had a quick flick through it. But I have 2 questions. Well, one's a comment. The second is a question. The first comment is that it seems like they've gone back to rolled monster damage instead of standard monster damage in their stat blocks, which I am so grateful for. Initially, they had for a little while there, like monsters just do 17 damage. And then if you wanted to figure out what you would roll, if you're the DM who wanted to roll it, you had to go to consult a chart, which like was the monster's size times something else. This is just so much easier because if you want standard damage, it's there in the stat block. But if you want to roll damage, it's also there in the stat block, which I think it's fun to roll dice. And I think GMs are allowed to have that fun too if they choose to.
Can I make a somewhat perpendicular interjection here?
Sure.
I've got a question for all of you because I've finally gotten into playing Baldur's Gate 3 and it's consuming my every thought. I have a little tadpole in my mind now. And one thing that Baldur's Gate does that actually really old D&D did also is that it prioritizes showing you a numerical range rather than a dice code, right? Like Magic Missile shows damage 3 through 12 or something like that rather than 3d4. And in older editions of D&D, you often had to reverse engineer that number into dice. When you're playing that game, do you like that? Do you like it for a video game but hate it for an RPG? Do you think that works?
The reason I like it for a video game is because I don't have to roll the dice. So I don't have to figure out, like, as long as I know what that range is, that is enough information for me to decide whether I'm going to try to cast one spell or another, right? Also, the spell's effects contextual as well. Or decide which weapon I want to be equipped with. But I'm not rolling the dice, so I don't need that information. I know that the game is rolling the dice in the background. In a D&D game, the DM is the game, right? They are the engine that's running the game. So if they don't have the dice that they need to roll in front of them, then they can't do the game, you know? Like that number range is just what the dice are going to add up to hidden away, because you don't need to know that for the context of playing Baldur's Gate.
I have noticed that in Baldur's Gate, because remember my bewilderment the first time I found out that Baldur's Gate rolls dice at all, like it visually represents the rolling of any dice. I thought that was, frankly, a little bit strange.
Sure.
I still think it is kind of, but I have noticed that playing Baldur's Gate 3, I kind of don't register how much damage I'm doing. Like I might look at the range and be like, this one does more damage than that one, so I'll cast this one. But then I'm fully focused on, did the attack hit or did it miss? And then I don't look at the health bar to see how far it went down. None of that. I'm just like, yeah, now we move on to the next person. So I think it becomes much more of a binary for me, hit or miss.
Yeah, okay. I mean, I think I'm the same, especially because it just happens so quickly as well. It's like you hit and the damage is done, and then it kind of moves on to the next thing that you're going to do. I'll look at the health bar to see how much health they have left and look at my damage ranges to be like, okay, is there a good probability that I'm going to be able to pull this off? And so many times I have not allotted enough magic missiles to kill a thing, which is infuriating when they have 1 hit point left at the end. You're like, I should have casted at a higher level. But I agree with you that I'm not kind of, strictly looking at their health necessarily as much as I might be at a tabletop. The second question I have of this SRD is 140 pages, I think, 120 pages, 140 pages. And the 5e SRD is 400 pages. Now, that's not a fair comparison necessarily, but the reason from a glance that there's such a big disparity is just from the number of stat blocks and the number of magic items and the number of spells that are included in the 5e SRD. It's pretty comprehensive for being able to create a 5e adventure. And what's missing from the 5e SRD in terms of like other, more than one subclass or, certain spells are missing or renamed for legal reasons. But one of the reasons it says we don't include every subclass for every class in the SRD is because this document isn't intended for you to just reprint. It's intended for you to create your own subclasses or your own or your own classes or your own spells, etc., etc. The problem I see with the Kobold Press one is that because the 5e one is so all-encompassing, while there is a lot of freedom to create your own stuff, there's also a lot of weight lifted off of especially first-time adventure writers who are like, oh, there should be some treasure in this room. What's a magic item from the SRD that I think would fit in this room? So that they don't have to invent 10, 20, or however many, maybe 5 to 10 new magic items themselves. They can create 3 to 4 new magic items and they've got 6 possibilities that they've pulled from the SRD, which doesn't seem as likely with the Kobold Press one because it's not as comprehensive for creating Tales of the Valiant or Black Flag adventures. Part of my question of this is, are the two SRDs compatible? Because the game is so similar. Could I write an adventure for Black Flag and use content from the 5e SRD that's not in Black Flag, reworked a little bit to fit into Black Flag, to convert to Black Flag more effectively?
I'm not sure you could have before the OGL crisis, but now that the 5e SRD is within the Creative Commons, I'm pretty sure that as long as you list both licenses, Creative Commons and the Black Flag SRD, then you're good.
Okay.
Anyway, I'm not a lawyer, but asterisk.
Because you have to throw in the orc license here, because that's what this SRD is put out under. So now you're got that on top of the other on top of, yeah, you can make whatever you want. You can pull in or pull out different things because you can create under either, both, or I guess neither if you want to go in a completely different direction. So it's, I mean, Wizards of the Coast talked about putting stuff out under the orc license.
Yeah,
really?
right.
Because, yeah, as long as it didn't contain anything that they didn't want to get out into the, for anyone to use, as long as they could protect their IP or certain things that they need to protect, what would stop them?
Yeah, okay. So in that case, the you might create an adventure using both licenses and both SRDs, and the Black Flag SRD is really there not for you to pull magic items from necessarily, but understand the writing format of Black Flag to be able to convert things across into Black Flag. Is that kind of the used case for that SRD if it's not just being used kind of on its own?
I would say so, yes.
Oh man, this is making me unnostalgic for earlier this year when we were trawling through legal advice every single week.
Because then you'd have both the open game license and the orc in your book. I don't know how much of the orc you have to include. I know you currently, under the at least under the old rules, you had to include like a copy of the open game license in your product to sort of indicate that this is an open game license product. I don't know off the top of my head, Shawn. I'm not sure if you know or anybody else for that matter. I can't imagine you have to include the whole orc because the orc's like 12 pages long or something like that.
That I don't know. I haven't been paying close enough attention to what's going on with the orc license to know all the specific details.
It really depends on the wording of it. If they haven't got a section that says, in order to comply with this, then you have to include this section of text, then I think the presumption is that you have to include the entirety of the text. And that's, a real pain sometimes. That was a big criticism of mine during the OGL days, was when licenses weren't clarifying that, you only have to include this section because it's not practical to expect a third-party product to include 12 pages of licensing details.
Yeah. It looks like we're giving Gandalf a migraine on his day off, so...
Having Nam flashbacks.
He's just the shell-shocked hamster suddenly.
Yeah.
So, yeah, look, that's a thing. If you want to create Valiant or Tales of the Valiant or Black Flag content, Ghostfire Gaming is, so have at thee. Quick Critical Role roundup. Now, I have no context for this because I'm not a huge live music person necessarily. I enjoy live music, but I'm just not in that scene. And when I told Dante this morning, his jaw just about hit the floor. Critical Role did their live UK performance. It was a reunion of the Mighty Nine, so they went back to Campaign 2, and they sold out Wembley Arena with more than 12,000 fans watching the performance. And there is footage online of the whole audience singing Your Turn to Roll, which was the theme song from the Mighty Nine days, like it's a rock concert, which is kind of cool. Have we made it? Are we there yet? Is D&D mainstream now?
The sad truth is no.
If they had sold out Wembley Stadium, then we would have made it.
Even then, what does mainstream even mean, right? Like, I remember the year that every news article was like, the band that has outsold Taylor Swift this year, the band that has sold the most albums in the world this year is a band you've never heard of, and it was Arashi, and they're a Japanese pop band, so of course in the West people aren't paying attention. But you know what I mean? It's like, what is mainstream? You have a group that's constantly selling out like 60,000 seat stadiums, and it means nothing in America.
Because everything is American, right? The world is American, pop culture is American. And if it didn't happen in the American audience, it didn't happen.
You know who's not American? Is Liam Neeson, star of Battleship. He's Irish.
Got him. Ding, 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 ding. You said the magic word.
There is a difference broadly between arenas and stadiums. There's arenas, stadiums, and domes, and they're all different sized venues.
Can you define the venue, the difference between them?
Arenas are smaller.
Go to watch Queen playing Live Aid. That's Wembley Stadium. Watch the
Right.
Also, just a really good concert moment.
Wembley Arena. There you go.
Right. Okay, that makes sense because, yeah, when I put this in the run sheet and I was looking back at it, there was a very real chance I could have misspoken and said Wembley Stadium because I've heard of Wembley Stadium. I didn't realize that there was a difference between Wembley Stadium and Wembley Arena. So
I mean,
that does put it in context.
Now I feel like we're underselling it. 12,000 fans. Huge.
That's huge.
That's
Right.
not nothing.
No.
Yeah. I mean, 12,000 fans in one place, that's just the population of the UK kind of going to, traveling from around, I would assume, to see this live. So, it could, not that I mean to draw direct comparisons necessarily, but is this a sign that the industry is kind of hitting a rock star level, even in the low, or is this a unique thing to Critical Role? Like Dimension 20 couldn't sell out a 12,000 person arena, could that? That's a question, not a statement.
Hey, let me tell you this. Critical Role could get Stephen Colbert doing charity with them. I don't think Wizards was able to do that.
Fair.
This might be a Critical Role thing.
Yeah, okay.
And did you just say that the population of the UK was 12,000 people?
No, I said...
Okay. I just
All
want to make sure.
12,000 people in the UK attended.
That's not what I intended to say. What I meant was that, particularly for, people that have an online audience, the Lorecast listeners are from all over the world, how many of them could we get in one room if we were to do, a live episode on a panel at Gen Con versus, and let's say, Gen Con's maybe not a great example because the people are there specifically to go to tabletop RPG panels. Let's just say, we did it as a the theater event at a small venue. The fact that they could get 12,000 people from one locality as an online media company is impressive in terms of, I suppose, the saturation level of their audience, just how big it is in different areas. You know what I mean?
I bet we could definitely get 12.
Okay, all right. Well,
Solid dozen.
There are dozens of us. Dozens.
Speaking of Critical Role, I thought I'd just mention this while we're doing a Critical Role roundup. They are doing, I think they did this last year as well, and they're doing it again, a Red Nose Day event. Nowhere near Red Nose Day, but that's the charity that it's benefiting, where they're doing a live play with the cast including Taliesin, Laura, Liam, and also Tony Hale and Sam Richardson of television fame, with Matt Mercer as the GM. you can go to tiltify.com, or if you search Tiltify Critical Role Red Nose Day, you'll probably find it, where you can donate to decide the characters' classes, the inciting incident at the start of the adventure, the treasure they find along the way, the creature that's stalking the party, and more. And it's all for a good cause. So go do that if you want to. The actual stream's on November 28th at 5 p.m. Pacific.
It is interesting to me because they previously did Red Nose Day with Stephen Colbert, right? That was the last two Stephen Colberts before Red Nose Day. And we know that Stephen had a backing in D&D. And so, it's slightly easier to get him to jump in on it. I'm curious what the D&D background is of Tony Hale and... Who was the second person?
Sam Richardson.
Sam Richardson.
Sam Richardson. I'm curious about.
They were both on the show Veep. For those of you who watch that show,
they're gonna Veep D&D. Got it.
Speaking of Critical Role, Nanonro does not like Critical Role. Let me tell you. Nanonro emailed podcast@ghostfiregaming.com to let us know that with a question as well. Suggesting, and I think I may be guilty of this to some capacity, that Critical Role is kind of overemphasized in its influence on the modern culture of D&D. I think I've said a couple times maybe on this Lorecast or pontificated upon Critical Role's influence in terms of the move away from the kind of more gold and dungeon crawling adventure styles of the 80s into the really story-driven characters never die, where our backgrounds are woven into the story kind of culture that D&D, at least online, more predominantly seems to have today. And Nanonro's theory or question really is about what about the influence of games like Baldur's Gate, Planescape Torment, and then my additions being Elder Scrolls, Dragon Age, The Witcher, in which, those games really are remembered for their story more so than their mechanics necessarily, or their dungeon crawling, and that if you die in those games, you just reload, come back, and you keep going. So you never have to deal with character death, and that the development of those kind of story-driven RPGs in the video game space is part of what's contributed to that style of play in the tabletop space.
Speaking anecdotally, even when I was working with Geek and Sundry and in college and looking for D&D groups, I found way more players through appealing to their love of Dragon Age than to them having any idea what Critical Role was.
No, this is a huge question, right? This goes back to maybe play styles, but has it affected the rules at all? Have video games affected the rules at all? Have different play styles, have different fantasy, what's the word I'm looking for, brands affected the rules at all? People said for 4th edition, they're just trying to replicate WoW on a tabletop, which is vaguely true, but didn't really hold up under scrutiny. The game itself came from fiction. The game itself came from Tolkien. It came from Conan. It came from these things, right? So that's what affected the game more than anything, even 50 years later, because there weren't video games then. Don't make me pull out my Pong colossal cave adventure stories again. So that's always been the case. Now, how people digest those rules may change. How people interpret and use those rules may change. But the rules themselves are pretty much always I'm going to venture, at least in my lifetime, which God knows how long that is, but will always be affected by that narrative background, that story, the fantasy fiction.
I'm so glad you said that, Shawn, because I nearly put together a PowerPoint presentation for this, but I ran out of time. Okay, so I just want to talk about D&D as virtual reality and phenomenological adherence to Aristotle's poetic structure. Okay, so in Aristotle's Poetics, Tragedy, this is a quote, tragedy is an imitation of an action that is admirable, complete, and possesses magnitude, affecting through pity and fear the purification or the purging of such emotions. So we're talking about catharsis there. We're talking about a couple different things. So phenomenology talks about the idea that essentially sensation creates existence, okay? So we experience a beingness through a kind of a feedback loop. Okay, so as we perceive the world, we are creating the world. That's the only way for us to become real, in a sense. So I would argue that the phenomenological body, the phenomenal body, while it is bound up somewhat in like physicalized ideas of sensation, it's not reliant on flesh. So it's more like a phantom limb. It's a sensing extension of ourselves into virtual spaces. Now, cyber theory talks about how in virtual spaces we participate in the disembodied embodiment of actions, okay? So when you type LMAO in the group chat, you're probably not like literally laughing physically with your real like analog reality body, but somewhere out there in virtual space, there is a version of you that does laugh at that thing, right? It's this psychic double, which Julian Dibble describes as the body-like self-representation we carry around in our heads. So our psychic double can experience things, and it makes those things, in a sense, real. All right, are we following? So Dibble also suggests that virtual experiences are neither exactly real nor exactly make-believe, but are nonetheless profoundly, compellingly, and emotionally true. I've brought out the quotes. The sharing of an individual's experience across both realms of real life and virtual reality makes sense only in the buzzing, dissonant gap between them. So Dibble is talking about cyberspace in a fairly sort of traditional context. He's speaking on experiences that he had in an old school Moo chat. But he eventually specifically calls out that cyberspace, he describes it as being a free-form version of Dungeons and Dragons. So we're really talking about a very similar thing here. The virtual reality that we're talking about, it isn't digital. It's a reality that we are make-believing into existence. Okay, so hauntologically, all right, there's a hauntological aspect. So ontology is like beingness. Hauntology is the idea that an event or a thing can have presence without even having to actually be there, right? Like a ghost, it haunts you. So Aristotle says the function of the poet is not to say what has happened, but to say the kind of thing that would happen, all right? The idea here is that a true universal experience, one that possesses magnitude, like he said, must be drawn from perceived happenings rather than actual physical events. Psychic doubling, all right? There you go. Cyber theory is back again. So the imitation of an action that Aristotle describes can be read as not a literal reenactment, like it might sound, but as an acceptance and a summoning even of a reality which is not there, but nonetheless has presence, okay? It impacts us. In taking on the character, a player in D&D is entering into a kind of a magic circle, okay, which they accept the reality is bound up in invented principles, okay? We accept that you roll the dice to complete an action. But this idea of this magic circle of rules it originated with Johann Huizinga, who talked about play as occurring in any spaces where the ordinary world is set aside to give way to fabricated rules and restrictions that are adhered to in the name of creating a sort of new virtual reality. Places within which special rules obtain. All are temporary worlds within the ordinary world, dedicated to the performance of an act or part. But these are invented rules that permeate society. This is our experienced reality. You know, I talk about courts, right? We've made up the rules of how the judicial system works, but we believe it into existence. And in turn, these kinds of rule systems that we wrap up around any form of game, whether it be a societal game or whether it be a game like D&D, they can in turn contribute an added layer of reality to the games that we play that access a virtual space, like D&D. So basically, when you hit 0 hit points in game, you hit 0 hit points in real life. That real life just happens to be virtual life, okay? So the reason I'm saying all of this is basically to just agree with what Shawn said. It's that, yes, to a certain extent, games are influencing D&D, but D&D influenced video games. And the things that influence D&D is the massive history of storytelling all the way back to at least Aristotle, where we've just got this inherited idea of what makes up a real feeling narrative experience, one that accesses catharsis, one that accesses a sense of truth, even if it isn't simulation of reality. So I do think that Critical Role is probably overstated in its influence, because I think that all of Western human history is the contributing factor.
See, I had that in my notes. I just didn't want to say it out.
Dael, you've made us a much more highbrow podcast than usual this week.
I had to pull out an old university presentation I did that was about Pokemon Nuzlocke storytelling online.
Our podcast.
I want to read that presentation too.
I was worried we wouldn't reach the end of the hour there, but we've done it handily.
And then Dael talked for 20 minutes.
Which is a great thing, which is a good thing, because it means I can save our next email for next week. If you've been listening to this episode, I should say before, we haven't done this in so long, because I just assume that people know where to find us now. Our handles are below our names. But if they don't, James Hake, this has been, speaking of reheating news, where can people find you on the internet, specifically YouTube?
I'm going to say this dressed like Gandalf. In the last month, I launched a YouTube channel at James J. Hake on YouTube, where I talk about game design. I take an analytical look at tabletop role-playing games, the culture surrounding it sometimes, but really a designerly look at the craft and business of being a game designer. Yeah, I hope you go check me out there. Twitter is burning. Don't follow me on Twitter anymore. Find me on a platform that's actually alive.
I also have a YouTube channel. It's called Monarch's Factory. Look, Twitter is burning, but I am still there at Daily Dael.
I also have a YouTube channel that handles the podcast I do with Teo Sabadia called Mastering Dungeons, the 1.5 most popular podcast in all the realms. And so you can check out there, and I'm on most social media at Shawn Merwin.
And you can find me over on the Ghostfire Gaming main YouTube channel, where I do YouTube videos specifically around dark fantasy and grounding your campaign, an emotionally authentic realm of grittiness and darkness. Anyway, go check that out.
And with our powers combined, we are
the Eldritch Lorecast. Like, subscribe, do all those things. We'd really appreciate it. We've had a lot of new listeners in the last couple of weeks. So thank you so much for joining. If you're a recent listener, or even if this is your first episode of the Lorecast, we will be back next week. However, all right, I'm going to say this now in a non-committal way for our American hosts. I'm pretty sure we've discussed this ahead of time. Next week, we'll be recording at 3 p.m. Pacific Standard Time, 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, because of daylight savings change. So 6 p.m. Pacific, 3 p.m. Wait, no, I got that the wrong way around. 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Pacific. You guys live in America.
Still 10 a.m.
Figure it out. Still
Eastern
10 a.m.
Australia.
So in every other time zone, it's not changing. It's just if you're in the United States and you've got daylight savings changing, then it's moving forward an hour, back an hour. I'm not sure which way that goes, but it's an hour earlier. My name has been Ben Byrne, here with James Hake. Sorry, brain farted there. Almost said James Dael. That would have been awkward. All right, I'm going to do that again. My name's been Ben Byrne, here with James. Oh no, I almost did it again.
Are you okay?
No, it's so spooky in here. I think my brain's overheating from having this satin bag on my head for the last hour. My name, Dael, you do it.
His name is Ben Byrne. He's been here with James Hake, Shawn Merwin, and Dael Kingsmill, and we will catch you next time on the Eldritch Lorecast. Ba-ba-da-ba-ba-da, ba-ba-da-ba.
Ba-ba-da-ba.
Ba-da-ba-da-ba-ba. Yeah, great. Good work. Good work, everyone.
Delightful. You know what?
Delightful.
Sometimes a costume doesn't match the temperature, the ambient temperature.